Hey everyone, I'm Brianna and I'm here with my partners Emma, Meredith, and Lauren. Today we're going to be presenting on our novel intrauterine device, the Embl IUD. So our inspiration for this product was frankly the lack of options available for those in need of reliable birth control. The only non-hormonal choices on the market today, aside from complete sterilization, which many try to lean away from due to its permanence, are the Paragard IUD, condoms, and family planning methods. Family planning and condoms are ineffective and do not give people the peace of mind they likely crave. The IUD is much better in terms of pregnancy prevention, yet is inaccessible to many people in the US. 1 in 20 people with female reproductive organs has an abnormally shaped uterus, and yet the US only has 3 IUD size options and no alternative shapes, as there are in other countries. In countries such as Norway, there are significantly more options, and so more people opt to use the IUD. 27% of their sexually active female population uses this device, in comparison to only 6.5% of people in the US. And in 10% of people in the US who do choose to get an IUD, the device expels, either coming out of place, falling out completely, or moving into the abdomen, which renders it useless as a form of birth control. Most are also looking to get away from hormonal birth control, given it as it has negative side effects on the body and mind, such as an increased rate of depression. It's time to take the next step in healthcare and diversify our birth control options. That's why we've designed a product that accounts for different uterus shapes and sizes, so those looking for long-acting and reversible birth control have a safe, comfortable, non-hormonal option that they can trust.
The female reproductive system is composed of internal and external structures. In terms of reproduction, the external structures allow sperm to enter the body and protect the internal structures from infection. The internal structures include the vagina, uterus, ovaries, and fallopian tubes. The uterus is where our device is implanted, and during fertilization, eggs in the fallopian tubes get fertilized from sperm and then travel to the uterus, where they implant into the uterine lining to develop into a fetus. To prevent pregnancy, many women ages 15 to 49 use some form of contraceptive. Commonly used contraceptives, which can be hormonal or non-hormonal, are female sterilization, the male condom, oral pill, and long-acting reversible contraceptives, which include IUDs. Sterilization is the only one that is permanent, as it cuts, closes, or removes the fallopian tubes. Condoms act as a physical barrier to prevent sperm from making contact with eggs and also prevent sexually transmitted diseases. The oral pill is a hormonal birth control that uses progesterone and/or estrogen to reduce ovulation and thin the lining of the uterus to make it less likely for an egg to attach. These hormones also prevent the ovaries from releasing an egg. Long-acting reversible contraceptives include IUDs and implants, both of which are highly effective, long-lasting, and reversible. Implants go into the arm, whereas an IUD is inserted into the uterus. IUDs can be either hormonal or non-hormonal, meaning they either release progesterone or copper ions over time. IUDs are becoming more popular as they are over 99% effective, long-lasting, convenient, and can be removed at any time. Women ages 20 to 39 are more likely to use an IUD than other forms of birth control methods. Women who have pelvic infections, think they might be pregnant, have cervical or uterine cancer, or had an abortion in the past 3 months should not use an IUD as it is a risk to their health. The hormones in hormonal IUDs thicken the cervical mucus, prevent the passage of sperm into the uterus, inhibit the survival of sperm, and alter the endometrium. They are typically prescribed to women with heavy, painful periods since they can get rid of periods in total or result in light spotting in between periods. Although they are effective and last 3 to 7 years, they have been shown to cause irregular bleeding, increased cramping, and an increased rate of depression. On the other hand, non-hormonal IUDs release copper ions to disrupt oocyte division and fertilization, decrease the mobility of sperm, thicken the cervical mucus, alter the endometrial lining, and decrease ovum transport speed. Women who have a copper allergy, Wilson's disease, or a bleeding disorder that makes it hard for their blood to clot should not use a copper IUD, as it may be a risk to their health. Copper IUDs can last up to 12 years with removal at any time if wanted, don't use hormones, and allow for regular period cycles. Currently, there are 4 hormonal IUDs and 1 copper IUD approved in the United States. Virena, Kylena, Liletta, and Skyla are the hormonal IUDs. Some limitations of these are that they use hormones as a spermicide and they don't range in size, making them uncomfortable for some users. A limitation with Paragard is that it causes heavier period flow, which will also be seen with our device as it is a copper IUD.
It is important to have an option for contraceptives. Specifically, the lack of non-hormonal IUDs drove us to design our device. Women should be comfortable with the type of contraceptive they choose to use, and with more users straying away from hormonal contraceptives due to their side effects, there needs to be more available options for a non-hormonal contraceptive. The low maintenance, longevity, and effectiveness of IUDs makes them an ideal option, which is why we focused on redesigning the copper IUD.
The EMBO IUD is a novel design in which the device can be altered on a case-by-case basis to fit into an individual. This concept of customization, as mentioned before, is lacking when it comes to the current non-hormonal IUDs that are FDA approved in the United States, making our device the perfect solution for this critical lack within the market. So the device is designed to function like an umbrella, in which there is a runner that extends the stretchers to their desired location depending on the uterus shape and size. This runner contains a locking mechanism to hold this desired shape. The locking mechanism is devised of round nicks along the base that the runner can click into. The umbrella shape allows for the IUD to be inserted into the body, similar to existing IUDs. However, this one can be adjusted in the body to ensure a more secure fit and reduce the chance for both embedment and expulsion. The length of the device is going to be 36 millimeters, and the width is adjustable between 20 to 32 millimeters. This is more accessible for women who have never been pregnant before, as their uteri tend to be smaller, with an average width of just 21.6 millimeters. This device will be similar to current copper IUDs, with a low-density polyethylene base and a copper wire wrapped around the main branch of the umbrella. We chose LDPE because it is biocompatible, has a strong flexibility and elasticity properties, and is resistant to corrosion, which is very important in a device with moving parts. The copper here acts as a spermicide, preventing the sperm from fertilizing the egg as the copper ions are released into the cervix. The amount of copper wire in this device is based on both the recommended daily intakes and the ISO standard for copper IUDs. The low-density polyethylene base with the arms and the runner will be created using the injection molding technique, in which the string will be set into place at the bottom of the base prior to the mold closing. The mold will close and the material will be injected in. Once the material solidifies, the two pieces, the base of the arms and the runner, will be adjoined. Once the IUD is put together, the copper wire will be wrapped around the base. The completed device will be sterilized using radiation sterilization as per ISO 11137. 600 samples from 1 to 10 lots will be tested to determine the effectiveness of our design.
Our IUD needs to meet the requirements for our particular device functionality, as well as tests given by ISO 7439, the standard for copper-bearing contraceptive intrauterine devices. The copper wire wrapped around the base of the device should weigh 176 milligrams with a surface area of 380 millimeters squared. For effective contraception and long-lasting use, the erosion rate of copper must be 40 micrograms per day. The LDPE body of the IUD needs to have a breaking force greater than 9.5 newtons and be flexible enough to withstand 0.20 newtons of force applied to the horizontal arms. The thread used for removal should have a breaking force of 8.89 newtons and measure at a length of 10.5 to 12.5 centimeters. The length of the thread can be cut shorter if necessary, depending on the patient's comfort and preferences. The force required to push the probe into place should be 5 newtons, and the force to release the locking mechanism by pulling on the string is also 5 newtons. These insertion and removal values are necessary to be less than the breaking force of the materials, yet higher than any forces that would be experienced in the uterine cavity to avoid accidentally deploying the mechanism.
So now to talk about the tissue interactions with our device. The cells within the tissue are our pseudostratified columnar epithelial cells. This is one layer of cells that have cilia to move mucus across the uterus and generate currents to propel the egg towards the uterus. They appeared stratified because the nuclei are found at different levels in each cell. The extracellular matrix for this tissue is the stroma, which is a layer of connective tissue in the endometrium. It is the largest portion of the endometrium, and although it is not well studied at this point, the stroma is thought to play a role in tissue proliferation and uterine breakdown and rebuild during the menstrual cycle. Its conformation and activities are heavily regulated by estrogen and progestin. This is an extremely important part of the uterine endometrium because it holds all of the other components together and plays an important role in the menstrual and reproductive cycles. The two cellular processes that we will be modifying with our device are the metabolism of the columnar epithelial cells and the functionality of sperm cells. As the device releases copper ions into the cervix, the nucleic acid metabolism of these epithelial cells will decrease. This means these cells will likely not reach maturation and are therefore incapable of constructing a uterine lining capable of supporting a pregnancy. These ions do not promote an abnormal metabolism, which could possibly lead to cancerous mutations, and instead just delay the normal development of the columnar epithelial cells. In terms of the sperm cells, which are not present in the uterus but are involved in fertilization, the copper ions released act as a spermicide by decreasing sperm vitality and motility. The quantification of this phenomenon can be seen in the figure on the right. So we have 4 in vitro tests that we're going to be using to test the functionality and effectiveness of our device. These tests are as follows. One test that we will be doing is instron testing of the device, looking at the tensile strength of the body, arms, and string. Each one of these components will be placed in the instron individually and will be stretched to evaluate the response to the stress. One benefit of this test is that it is simple to perform, and the data will give us a basic understanding of how our materials react to the application of force. However, it does not mimic the uterus well and gives no insight into how these 3 pieces will interact as a whole. To gain an understanding into how these pieces will react together, we will do instron testing of the locking mechanism. This will help us to ensure that the locking mechanism is released with exactly 5 newtons of force placed on the strings. This is absolutely necessary for our device because this is how the IUD will be extracted. If it is released at a lower force, it may be activated accidentally, and if it is too high, the doctor may not be able to extract it. Once again, this does not mimic the uterus well, but it does show all the parts working at once. Moving on to a more in vivo-like testing of our locking mechanism, it will be tested in vitro with a uterine model filled with glycerin with a viscosity of 1880 centipose to mimic the viscous uterine fluid. The model will be composed of 2 rectangular perspex boards separated by a 2.5 millimeter thick rubber pad, which has the geometry of the inner cavity of the uterus, and 2.3 millimeter openings to represent the fallopian tubes. This is a more advanced look at our locking mechanism. One limitation is that nobody is sure of exactly the viscosity of uterine fluid in vivo, so it cannot be confirmed that glycerin is the most accurate model. The release rate of copper ions will be measured to ensure a sufficient amount for effective contraception while not being cytotoxic. To do this, the IUD will be submerged in simulated uterine fluid. After a period of time, the simulated uterine fluid will be sampled and replaced with fresh fluid. The sample will be measured using an atomic absorption spectrometer, and the ion concentration will be extrapolated from a standard curve. The release rate should average around 440 micrograms per day, as Meredith mentioned earlier. This test is simulating in vivo conditions better with the simulated uterine fluid. However, its major limitations are the limited sensitivity and linearity. Samples also cannot be extrapolated below or above the range of the standard curve.
In terms of in vivo testing, our group will be using a small and large animal model to test the safety and effectiveness of our proposed IUD design. The small animal we will be using is a hamster, as they have been seen to test the effects of birth control before. It will not be possible to test our full-size design in this animal model, but we will be able to gain an understanding as to the effect of the copper ion release on fertility. The large animal model will be the chimpanzee. The uterine anatomy of a female chimp is extremely similar to that of a female human, meaning that they would be the ideal candidate to test the full-size prototype on. There have also been studies where chimpanzees are given IUDs to lower their own rate of reproduction, meaning that we would likely be able to test effectiveness, at least to some degree, of our device in this model. To determine the efficacy of these models, we will monitor the pregnancy rate over the course of 5 to 7 years while the IUD is implanted. For comparison, Paragard has a 1.5 pregnancy rate in the first 7 years of use, which we will aim to be within 1% of. The large animal model is a stronger representation than the hamster, but still has limitations in that the uterus is a slightly different average size and shape than a person. In summary, the main advantage of our IUD design is the ability to adjust it to the size and shape of the user's uterus. Other advantages come with the nature of copper as an active ingredient, including that it works immediately upon insertion, has a contraception efficacy of 99%, lasts up to 12 years, and is completely reversible. Disadvantages include temporary increase in cramping and discomfort, increase in amount of bleeding during periods, and spotting in between periods. So thank you for listening. We will now take questions.